course.
For that service of process, the way I was understanding is if you're going to establish a legal civil case, you have to serve them, and then that serving the claim or the injury has to be included because
Now
obviously
that's
there
the
is no
that's
injury. Huh.
no. You say injury. Say you must state a claim for which relief is entitled, for which the person's entitled to relief. People
Correct.
say injury, and that became really popular within the lexicon of like phrases, and everybody said, who's the injured party? Well, what you want to say is who's entitled to relief, because you don't necessarily have to be injured to be entitled to relief. Injury would come from, say, on what's today, uh, October 4th, 2024, while traveling southbound on US 301 in Hillsborough County, Florida. Uh, Plaintiff Greg Doss, parentheses, plaintiff, uh, was in a vehicle and came to a stop at the intersection of US 301 South and Adamo Drive. At that same time and place, uh, North Carolina was traveling southbound and failed to adhere to the rules of the road and rammed his vehicle into the rear of the vehicle occupied by plaintiff. Count one, negligence. You see how that works?
Mhm.
Uh, I incorporate paragraphs 1 through whatever as if they're right here. Plaintiff, uh, respondent, defendant actually to be failed to recognize rules of the road, and because of his negligence caused injury and da 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 da. I'll actually pull up one of my complaints and let you see what that looks like. And then you have to tell why this court has jurisdiction too. This court has jurisdiction pursuant because the acts giving rise to this action took place in this county. This court has jurisdiction pursuant to whatever rule. That's how you figure this out. So when we say, what's the injury in fact? No, that stuff sounds fucking fancy. What does it really mean? And it may have some substantial meaning, but the reality is, what did you do that would entitle her to relief? That's your question.
Right. Right. No, and I was saying that if that's not included in the process, then essentially you weren't served properly, and you could argue it needs to be dismissed because essentially, what are
Hold on,
they adjudicate?
hold on.
Oh,
You were
sorry.
served. Hold on, but they didn't make a claim for which she was entitled to relief. I know you all have ever been in court, have heard them say failure to state a claim for which relief can be granted. That might be where your issue is. There's no.
Right. Right.
Not that she didn't have a baby, not that all this other stuff didn't go on, but what is her claim that would entitle her to relief? What is she saying that you did for which she should be granted any kind of economic benefit? Now, if she just says she had a baby, you can say, well, who gives a damn? That's not an issue. That's a privacy issue. If she said she had a baby and you failed to do something that you had an obligation to do, which we went over last week, so I'm gonna tell you go to last week's video, that would be different. But then that has to be spelled out with specificity. Does that make sense to you? Does anybody have a question with that?